In recent days, the spotlight has shifted once more to Belarus, where President Alexander Lukashenko has issued a series of stark warnings to both Ukraine and the NATO alliance, signaling that Minsk is ready to escalate its posture in the region. Lukashenko, long an ally of Vladimir Putin and Russia, appears to be stepping out of the shadows to assert Belarus's own voice in the ever-complex power dynamics of Eastern Europe. His rhetoric makes clear that Belarus perceives the regional crisis not only as a Ukrainian matter, but as a test of its own survival and strategic relevance. Lukashenko's warning to Ukraine is uncompromising. He has indicated that if Belarus's borders or security are threatened, Minsk will react immediately. As reported in international media, he declared that the red line is our national borders. If they cross them, our response will be immediate. While he phrases the warning as defensive, the implication is unambiguous. Belarus reserves the right to take military or other significant action if it perceives Ukrainian or allied maneuvers as hostile. For Kyiv, this raises the stakes substantially. Ukraine already fights on multiple fronts, and the potential of Belarus entering or supporting additional escalation complicates its strategy. At the same time, Lukashenko's message to NATO is a clear signal that Belarus views the Western alliance not just as observer, but as potential direct actor in the region. He has warned that involvement of NATO, especially in terms of providing advanced weaponry to Ukraine, could cross a threshold of escalation. According to media outlets, he stated that handing over subsonic Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine would escalate the situation to a nuclear war. While the statement may serve partly as rhetorical positioning, it reveals a readiness to link Belarus's security to the broader confrontation between NATO and Russia, thereby inviting NATO to think twice before further deepening its support for Ukraine. The Belarusian leader's posture cannot be understood in isolation. It must be viewed in light of Belarus' evolving strategic relationship with Russia. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Belarus has provided logistical, territorial, and other forms of support to Russia's operations. Even though Minsk has claimed it would only enter the war directly if attacked, the infrastructure and military backing it has allowed indicates a clear alignment with Moscow's agenda. This long-standing alliance gives Belarus greater strategic weight in the region and makes its warnings more credible. Given this backdrop, Lukashenko's current posture can be viewed as a twofold maneuver. First, it is a demonstration of Belarus asserting itself as a stakeholder in the conflict, not merely a passive conduit for Russian operations, but an actor with its own red lines and demands. Second, it is a message to the West that Belarus remains firmly in the Kremlin's orbit, and that any miscalculation involving Belarus could carry broader consequences. From the Russian side, President Putin is unlikely to be pleased by Belarus drawing more attention to its own role. While Russia benefits from Belarus providing territory, resources, and political cover, one of Putin's strategic goals is to keep the focus on Moscow. Belarus, raising its profile, introduces unpredictability. It raises expectations and risks that Minsk may seek more autonomy or leverage, complicating Moscow's calculus. In this sense, Lukashenko's warnings may cause irritation or even frustration at the Kremlin, as they suggest Belarus is no longer entirely content being simply a satellite. The practical implications of the warnings are serious. For Ukraine, the possibility of Belarusian involvement or facilitation of escalation at its northern or northeastern border adds another layer of threat. Ukraine has already warned of increased Belarusian military activity and drills near the border. The prospect of opening a new front or of dealing with missile deployments or allied operations via Belarus would stretch Ukraine's resources further. For NATO, the warning serves as a reminder that the alliance's eastern flank is still vulnerable and that escalation involving Belarus could draw in NATO members, particularly the Baltic states and Poland, given their proximity. From the viewpoint of diplomacy and global strategy, the situation underscores how the war in Ukraine has broader ripple effects. Belarus's heightened rhetoric accomplishes several things. It seeks to deter further Ukrainian or Western action by raising the specter of nuclear or near-nuclear escalation. It seeks to entrench Belarus's role as a key player in the Russia-Ukraine theater, and it pressures the West to consider Belarus's demands or risk a wider confrontation. Yet there is also an element of risk and posturing. Lukashenko may be leveraging this bold tone to secure greater concessions from both Russia and the West. By positioning Belarus as a critical pivot, he may seek economic, security, or political benefits, perhaps better treaty terms with Russia or incentives from Western countries seeking to prevent full escalation. At the same time, this gambit runs the risk of miscalculation. If Kyiv or NATO interpret the warnings as a bluff and misjudge Belarus's capacity or intent, escalation could spiral beyond what any party currently expects. For Moscow, the rising assertiveness of Belarus may be double-edged. On one hand, it underscores the strength of the alliance. Belarus is presenting itself as ready to front line if needed. On the other hand, control becomes more challenging. If Minsk takes its own initiative, it could complicate Moscow's strategic timeline or provoke undesired escalations with NATO or Ukraine before Russia wants them. Putin's anger or frustration, thus, may stem from the fact that the Kremlin has less leeway to manage events behind the scenes when a partner state publicly declares red lines and intentions. Meanwhile, the risk to NATO's eastern members grows for countries like Poland and the Baltic states, which already view Belarus as part of the broader Russian threat envelope. The latest developments reinforce the need for vigilance. The alliance may be forced to allocate more resources and attention to Belarus's border, airspace, and possible missile deployments, diverting energy and funds from other fronts. In the coming weeks, the narrative to monitor will include whether Belarus transitions from threats to actual operational steps, such as positioning of missile systems near the border, joint drills with Russia, or even limited engagements designed to test NATO's response. If Belarus begins to operationalize its warnings, that would mark a significant escalation beyond mere rhetoric. So far, Minsk has asserted its warning posture rather than acted overtly, which itself may be a calculated move designed to raise costs for Western support of Ukraine. Finally, from the perspective of international stability, what we're witnessing is a danger of incremental escalation creeping into full confrontation. Belarus is no longer simply a neighbor to Ukraine or a passive ally to Russia. It is signaling intent to act and redefining its role in the theater. That means all parties, Ukraine, NATO, Russia, and Belarus, must tread carefully. Mistakes or misinterpretation could lead to rapid escalation. The absence of deterrence or clarity about thresholds could usher in a new, wider dimension of this conflict. In summary, President Lukashenko's warnings to Ukraine and NATO mark a turning point. Belarus is signaling that it is prepared to strike back in its own right, revealing its red lines and asserting itself as a key actor. Ukraine faces a more complex threat environment. NATO confronts a reinvented adversary posture, and Russia may find that its ally is becoming more independent and harder to manage. The stakes in this region are rising. What remains to be seen is whether these warnings remain at the level of messaging or whether they transform into action that reshapes the security dynamics in Eastern Europe.